this video, we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And before we start, I would like to tell you that most likely in coming days, we're going to see something big, something unbelievable, and something most likely impossible. Most likely, the Russian Federation will launch the biggest ever missile and drone attack. This is going to be the biggest attack since the beginning of the special military operation. I believe that Russia may try to use at least 1,000 drones and hundreds of missiles. And most likely, Russia will attack energy facilities and energy sector of Ukraine. At least this information was provided by different pro-Ukrainian monitors. Ukrainian channel are warning that Russia is preparing for a massive strike in Ukraine's energy and gas sectors. So why the Russians are going to do this and why the Russians still haven't done this? Everything is very simple. For example, during the previous 24 hours, additional another attacks carried out by Ukraine were recorded with drones. And once again, Ukraine attacked military facilities and the most important oil refineries and oil facilities, so energy facilities of the Russian Federation. For example, in this video, we can see how Ukrainians attacked the city of Ufa, which is located in the central part of Russia. As a result of this attack, as you can see, the Ufa oil refinery was damaged, really damaged. We can see fire anomaly. And that was not the only strike. According to information we have, another city, another oil refinery was attacked in the vicinity of the city by the name of Ugля-Uralsky. Here we can't see the drone itself, but here we can see the consequences of Ukrainian attacks. Some construction was damaged, but obviously this construction belongs to a part of a Russian energy facility, energy sector in this part of Russia. So, and these two strikes are not the only strikes that were carried out by the Ukrainians since the beginning of probably summer of 2025. The Ukrainians have already carried out probably hundreds of attacks, and the Russians and Russia suffers huge problems with this. And the most interesting is not just attacks themselves, but the problem for Russian Federation is that Ukrainians are attacking the central part of Russia, this part of Russia, which used to be considered as the most protected part of the Russian Federation. So, when talking about Russians, when talking about the World War III or something like this, the Russians, first of all, first thing that comes to their minds is that they are able to move to the central part of Russia and they will be protected. They will be protected. They will be able to build industry facilities and to continue, let's say, this World War III. But now we see that there is not even a single square kilometer of Russia that can be protected, that is protected from these drones. So at least this is the message that the Ukrainians are sending to the Russians and to the world. So the question is another question: why the Russians still haven't launched this massive missile drone strike? What the Russians are waiting for? The thing is that most likely the Western intelligence knows for sure that the Russians are going to do this. So that is why the Western countries began their own, let's say, special operation. Let's call it like this. NATO has launched operational Eastern Sentry to protect the airspace of Poland and the Baltic states following the incident with Russian drones. So during the previous days, Poland was closing their airfields. As for the Poland launched their air raid siren sounds and many other different things just to test, to practice, to get better before this possible attack. Furthermore, don't forget that there are aircrafts flying along the border with Poland. The airspace have been closed. Lithuania and Estonia have closed their airspace during the joint Russian-Belarusian military drills. This means for countries have now imposed restrictions for the duration of the exercises: Poland, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. Another important thing, another important incident, it took place, for example, during the previous nights on the territory of Romania. The sources are saying that Russian drones over Romanian NATO aircraft in the sky. The video shows the city of Tulcea a couple of dozen minutes ago. The Romanian authorities announced a danger to populated areas near the Romanian-Ukrainian border. Messages about the possible fall of objects were sent to residents of the city of Tulcea in Romania near the border with Ukraine. The Romanian Air Force allegedly intercepted a Russian drone over national airspace. So this is Romanian Air Force F-16 did not shoot down Russian drone. There were articles And of course, we have the video of Romanian F-16 flying in the sky. So as we can see, that what does it mean? The Western countries are carry out practicing along the border with F-16s with the purpose to track Russian drones. Maybe that's even weren't launched by Russia, but maybe they were launched even by Ukraine. But it doesn't matter. The most important is to have additional practice to learn how to bring down Russian drones, and we see that all these things the Western countries are doing just with one reason, one purpose. At some point, to start helping Ukraine to bring down Russian drones and missiles. And most likely during this massive drone and missile attack that is going to happen during the next several days, the Western countries, Romania and NATO will help Ukrainians to bring Russian drones and missiles down. And obviously, this is going to be another round of escalation. So, and this is another reason why the Russians haven't launched their attack yet, because they're waiting when the drills are ended. And maybe as soon as they are ended, they will try to attack. Who knows? At the same time, we got report that Poland has begun closing all rail borders crossing with Belarus. So another important thing, in my opinion, that most likely, as we discussed several days ago, after the end of these military drills, the Russian Federation will not remove their forces from the territory of Belarus, because as for now, it is very dangerous to remove forces from the territory of Belarus. The Russians will try to keep their forces on the territory of Belarus, not, let's say, with the purpose to occupy the territory of Belarus. The reason of Russians is to stay as close as possible to the Kaliningrad region. They need to keep their forces somewhere here, because if something goes wrong, they need to be very close to this Kaliningrad region with the purpose probably to stabilize the situation, or at least not to allow the Western countries to make any sabotage or any, let's say, activity in the direction of this region of the Russian Federation. So the situation remains tense, as we can see. Anyway, let's wait and see what is going to be next. But obviously, the next massive missile and drone attack carried out by the Russians is going to be very, very interesting. And the most important, this is going to be a very dangerous situation, because most likely the Western countries will begin attacking and destroying Russian drones, at least above the territory of the western part of Ukraine. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation on the ground. The most important updates of the previous nights are coming from the territory of the city by the name of Stepnogorsk. As you can see, we have changes on the ground. During the previous 12 hours, pro-Ukrainian resources published this video where we can see how Ukrainians were attacking Russians in different parts of the Stepnogorsk region. Lots of explosions, lots of attacks. Ukrainians were attacking Russian soldiers, buildings, temporary deployment points, and many other things. And one of the episodes was recorded exactly in this point, which means that the Russians launched their major offensive operation with the purpose to establish complete control over the city by the name of Stepnogorsk. So now it's become clear what the Russians are trying to achieve. Of course, the main task of the armed force of the Russian Federation most likely is to get this red line. So this is what the Russians will try to achieve. So why this red line? Why not the entire city of Primorsk? Why not moving further in the direction of Grigorovka and in the direction of the city of Zaporozhye? Everything is simple. You know that since the beginning of the special military operation, more precisely, probably since the beginning or since the end of 2023, the Russians changed their tactics when they were attacking different trenches and fortifications. So, if you remember, we used to see the same story in the Avdiivka direction after the fall of Avdiivka. Now we can see the same story in the Zaporozhye direction. So the Russians' goal is to establish complete control over this dense network of the fortifications, as you can see, that lays between the city of Stepnogorsk, all these trenches, yellow lines, till the city of Orekhov. So there are hundreds of strongholds that the Russians are trying to take under control. And obviously, if Russians begin offensive operation from the south in the northern direction, they would be defeated with the heaviest losses ever. But if the Russians are able to take under complete control the city of Stepnogorsk until the lines, as we discussed a minute ago, the Russians, in this case, will have possibility to move from the west in the eastern direction, and to take every single stronghold and trench from the west to the east until the city of Orekhov itself. So they will move from the west in the eastern direction, and obviously, in this case, they have more chances. if they take this dense network of the fortifications under control, they will have a very strong positions because the Ukrainians will not be able to counterattack Russians from the north and the southern direction due to this gap and due to these fields and very huge distance between Ukrainian strongholds and Russian strongholds. And Russians will have a very strong dense network of the fortifications. So the same thing, by the way, we can see right now in the eastern Zaporozhye direction. As you can see, the Russians are doing the same. The Russians are attacking these strongholds between the cities of Uspenovka, Poltavka, Velika Mikhailovka, and Podkrovka, not from the south to the north, but the Russians are moving from the east in the western direction. So here we can see the same story in this direction, and here we can see the use of these tactics in this area as well. So this is like a live example of how the Russians are taking these trenches under complete control one by one. So this means that something like this is going to happen in this area in coming days, maybe months. Now let's move to the Pokrovsk direction. During the previous 24 hours, nothing was recorded. The Russians published several videos of how they were bombing and attacking temporary deployment points of the 79th Air Mobile Brigade of the Armored Forces of Ukraine. No changes on the ground. The pro-Ukrainian resources continue claiming and stating that the Ukrainians continue their counterattacks with the purpose to force the Russians to fall back. The pro-Ukraine resources reported that they managed to bring here lots of very powerful FPV drone crews that control the entire sky. But despite all these talks, all these means that Ukrainians use, we still see that they haven't managed to cut these breakthrough pockets. We still see that the Russians hold their positions, but of course, let's wait and see what is going to be next. But obviously, now we can say for sure that the Russians did their job they were tasked for to force the Ukrainians to use as many as possible units in this area, while the Russians were advancing on different directions, like the Zaporozhye direction, like the city of Konstantinovka, and of course the city of Kupinsk. Now let's talk about the Konstantinovka direction, and according to information we have, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians eliminated the pockets to the southeast of the city. If you remember, yesterday we were talking about this pocket, that the pocket was caught and cauldron by the Russians. At least this information was provided by different neutral mappers. Furthermore, we had a video where we can see how Russians entered the southeastern part of the city of Konstantinovka. So everything tells us that the major battle for the city has begun. And we were waiting when the Russians will eliminate this pocket completely and when the Ukrainians encircled there would be able or would be allowed to evacuate from here. So, and today we colored this territory because Ukrainians published this video where we can see how Ukrainians were attacking Russians in different parts of this area, and at least two geolocations were recorded. One of the Ukrainian attack took place to the on the southern part of this huge forest. Another attack took place to the east of this forest. Based on this video and based on these episodes, we came to the conclusion that most likely the pocket was eliminated. Maybe the pocket itself hasn't been eliminated, but obviously the pocket was cut into several pieces, many pieces, and now the Russians, maybe there are still some pockets of resistance from the Ukrainian side, but one thing is clear, that it's just a matter of time when probably the entire territory will be under complete control. For now, we believe there are still some pockets of resistance on Ukrainian groups that are trying to escape this encirclement. It will take up to 2-3 days to finish the clearing operation, and then the Russians will maintain the lines and continue offensive operation towards the villages of Plesheyevka, Ivanopolye, and they will get the southern and the southeastern outskirts of the city of Konstantinovka itself. The battle for this area is going to start very soon. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.